He was constitutionally chosen President of the United States, although he had not received a majority of the popular vote. The election was ominous because it was sectional, Mr. Lincoln having carried all the northern states but not one of the southern. The intensest excitement prevailed, while passion blew the gale and held the rudder too. While I believed in the right of succession, I deprecated the exercise of that right because I loved the Union and the flag under which my ancestors had enjoyed the blessings of civil and religious liberty. I did not think that Lincoln's election was a sufficient cause for dissolving the Union, for he had announced no evil designs concerning Southern institutions, and even if he had, he was powerless to put them into execution. He could have done nothing without the consent of Congress, and his party was in a minority both in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. Before Christmas, South Carolina, not caring for consequences and blind to the horrible future, passed an ordinance of succession, and her example was followed in quick succession by Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. These 7 states organized the Southern Confederacy, of which Jefferson Davis was inaugurated president, February 18, 1861. In April, Fort Sumter was captured, and on the 15th of that month, President Lincoln issued a proclamation calling on the remaining states to furnish their quotas of an army of 75,000 soldiers for the purpose of destroying the Confederate government. 2 days later, the Virginia Convention passed an ordinance of succession. Being compelled to take sides, the Old Dominion naturally cast her lot with her southern sisters. War had begun. Intestine war, of whose magnitude and duration no living man had any adequate conception. These events conspired with other causes to infuse in me a martial spirit. The conviction was growing in me that, as my native state was about to be invaded, I must have a place in the ranks of her defenders. I was influenced by speeches delivered by Governor Floyd, Professor Holcomb, and Dr. Bledsoe, and still more by the contagious example of my roommate, William H. Chapman, who had gone with a company of students to Harper's Ferry and had returned. What brought the conviction to a head was a flag. One morning, in the latter part of April, as I was walking from my boarding house to the university, I saw a Confederate banner floating above the rotunda. Some of the students, during the night, surmounting difficulty and braving danger, had clambered to the summit and erected there the symbol of a new nation. I was thrilled by the sight of it, as if by an electric shock. There it was, outstretched by a bracing northwest wind, flapping defiantly, arousing patriotic emotion. Unable longer to refrain, I went as soon as the lecture was concluded to Professor Minor's residence and told him I was going to enter the military service of Virginia. He sought to dissuade me, but perceiving that he could not alter my rash decision, he gave, at my request, a written permission to leave his classes. But how to get home? That had become a perplexing question. I could not go the way I had come because the Virginia, fearful of capture, had ceased to make trips from Fredericksburg to Lancaster, and there was no railroad to that part of the state. Knowing that my uncle Addison Hall was a member of the convention, I determined to take a train to Richmond and seek his advice. I felt relieved when he informed me that he was going the next morning and that I could go along with him. We took an early train to West Point and, being ferried across the Mattapony River, obtained from one of his friends a conveyance to Urbana. We hired a sloop to take us to Carter's Creek, and thence we proceeded in a farm wagon to his home in the village of Kilmarnock. The next morning, he sent me to the home of the Reverend Dr. Thomas S. Dunaway, my brother and my guardian. In a few days, I enlisted in a company that was being raised by Captain Samuel P. Gresham, who had been a student at the Virginia Military Institute, and thus the student's gown was exchanged for the soldier's uniform. Before we were regularly mustered into service, an expedition was undertaken that indicated at once the forwardness of our people to engage the enemy and their ignorance of military affairs. The report having been circulated that a Federal gunboat was lying in Mill Creek, in Northumberland County, its capture or destruction